morning again, everyone. And a special welcome to those who have joined us online since the beginning of Mass or are watching sometime later this week. 40 years ago, almost 40 years ago, my family and I moved from Scotland to Canada, and we settled in a small rural town in Nova Scotia. I'm not going to say which one because, well, we went to church the first weekend. It was a very overwhelming experience. We sat there, kind of like this, but not quite. This is not exactly as shown. I have mom and dad and several siblings. But you know, no one said hello to us. No one acknowledged us. And we kind of stood out like a sore thumb. I mean, if you think I've got a wee bit of a Scottish accent now, back then I was a wee Glasgow boy with a very strong accent, not to mention my mom and dad. And everyone knew we were new, but we were sitting in church and no one acknowledged us, no one talked to us, no one said hello to us the first week. The second week, exact same thing. The third week, the exact same thing. And I don't think that whole time, my mom's here. Mom, you remember that, right? It was awful. And I remember one particular moment, seeing the priest walking up the aisle and stopping and looking at us as if to say, oh yeah, that's those people. And he turned around and kept on going. That was our whole experience. And I think back and think maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about hospitality in the life of a church. It's also one of the reasons why I think that people who are new to a church often make the best hospitality people because they know what it feels like. And so on a weekend, if you see me sometimes I seem to be distracted. If you come up to say hello to me and I seem distracted, it's nothing personal. It's because I'm looking out for the new people. That's what I'm doing. This weekend is the third week of our preaching series, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? And in this preaching series, we're exploring the centrality of hospitality at every level of our parish. In the first week, when we heard the story of Jesus inviting Peter to go out into the deep water, we made this point, that intentional hospitality will always take us out of our comfort zones. Last week, Deacon David preached, and in recognizing the fact that Jesus welcomed the outsider, he reminded that we as a parish had to do that too. And here was his point. If you're a parishioner, you're a host. Any parishioners here this morning? 5. Okay, great. So the rest of you are all our guests. But if you believe that you are a parishioner of this parish, you're a host. And we have guests to welcome. Many of you remember the story last week about sanitize. So if you haven't seen that, it's worth going back to look at. Now this week, here's the point that I hope, if you leave here today and remember anything, here's what I hope that you remember. That hospitality is about welcoming people into a community, not just into a building. Hospitality is about welcoming people into a community, not just a building. The gospel this weekend speaks about human relationships in many dimensions. And it moves us, Jesus moves us beyond natural relational dynamics to include even our enemies, those who persecute us. That we are to not just love and do good to those who love and do good to us. This morning I want to address 3 assumptions that shape our beliefs about hospitality. Now, the thing is about assumptions is that we assume things. And assumptions that are often unconscious shape our beliefs. And beliefs share our actions, and our actions shape our community, shape our church. So I want to look at 3 assumptions. The first of these is an assumption about the very nature of Christianity itself. See, Christianity is deeply personal. It's personal. We're called to have a personal relationship with Jesus, to have a personal encounter. It's personal, but it's not private. In the gospel today, Jesus is presented speaking using, for the most part, plural. The verbal forms are in the plural. The pronouns you, which are ambiguous in English, because you or you. Well, guess what? Jesus is speaking to all of us. He's speaking to his followers as a community, not as individuals. It's plural. You see, in the Gospels, there is no presumption of the kind of individualism that is common today in our culture. Jesus calls his followers also to be proactively relational in a way that takes them out of their comfort zone. Yet so often in the church, we operate as if we were members of Catholics Anonymous, with the social part kind of optional for those who are into that kind of thing. Here's the point. The church is about we in Jesus, not me in Jesus. I spent a lot of time thinking that one up, but anyway. The second assumption is about the nature of worship. The heart of our worship as Catholics is the Eucharist, the Mass. And the Eucharist has two dimensions. It has a vertical dimension. We come to worship God, who is transcendent. And it has a horizontal dimension, because we come as a community of faith. It's communal worship. It's not a bunch of individuals saying their own prayers to God who just happen to be in the building at the same time. That's why liturgical gestures are important. We stand together, we kneel together, we sing together. Because we worship as one body. And yet these two dimensions are often held in tension. I think back, well, I don't remember it, but some of you may remember the years before the watermark event of the Second Vatican Council, with the old liturgy, the way that it was done. Some of you remember that, right? I'm not looking at anyone in particular. But which dimension was emphasized in the old way of doing the liturgy, the vertical or the horizontal? The vertical. I mean, there almost was no horizontal, zero horizontal. And I think that long tradition of coming to church being about worship of God with really no emphasis on the horizontal is sometimes shaped us in a way that has made us seem more inhospitable than we actually are. Because we were trained, weren't we? You're not to talk in church. To come into this space is about to be in relationship with God. And so it could almost create the feel of a lack of hospitality. I don't think Catholics are that bad. But I think it's held in tension. The vertical and the horizontal are held in tension. In some places, perhaps in the 70s and the 80s, the pendulum swung, that we became so much about community and connecting with one another that there was a loss of the sense of the vertical, of the mystery. You see, our churches as Catholics are not just gathering spaces. They're sacred spaces for worship. But here's the thing. They're not just sacred spaces for worship. It's also a gathering space. And as Catholics, we're called to the good old-fashioned both and, to do both. It's both. It's about the vertical and the horizontal, and we can do this in a way that respects the integrity of the Eucharist. The third assumption is about the nature of the church itself. A number of years back, I had someone say to me, "Father, your job is to meet the needs of parishioners." And I remember I said, "No, it's not." She was kind of taken aback. I said, "My job is to lead our parishioners to meet the needs of our community." Now, the truth is, both are right. She was kind of right. It's another one of those both and things. But there's a difference in that mindset, isn't there? That somehow my role in all that we have exists to serve us. Guess what? That's what a club is. A club exists primarily to serve the needs of its members. And the church is not a club. The church is the only organization that exists primarily for the sake of those who do not belong or do not yet belong. That's what we call mission. And when we forget this, we can become, as Pope Francis has said, a self-referential church, a church that is in itself, of itself, and for itself. So we are not a club, we are a church. We live today in a time of conflict. There's so much conflict that seems to be happening in our nation and around the world. Many of us have perhaps been shocked by some of the scenes that we've seen on TV from Ottawa and the division that seems to be growing in our country. We're hearing in the news about massing of troops on the border of the Ukraine and an imminent invasion that is so reminiscent of something from 1939 and is frankly very, very alarming. We are in need today in our nation and in our world of reconciliation, of reconciling communities. And that's exactly, I believe, what Jesus is calling his followers to be. Jesus stretches us beyond what is reasonable. He calls us to love and welcome our enemies, to love and welcome those who hate us, persecute us, do us wrong, those who are rude to us, those who are ungrateful, and those who are indifferent. He even says, if you only love the people who love you, so what? Like, anyone can do that. If you only do good to people who do good to you, like, big deal. If you only welcome the people who welcome you, have you ever done that? Have you ever gone into a place and you see someone you know and you're thinking, I'm going to wait and see if they say hello to me. I'm not going to say hello to them. I'm going to wait to see if they say hello to me. And then if the person doesn't say hello, we say, that person never, I was there, they never said hello to me. Of course, I never said hello to that person. It's crazy. The Lord calls us to take the initiative. Not just a few of us, not just members of the hospitality team, but every single one of us. Remember, if you're a parishioner, you're a host. Sanitize. We have to take the initiative. Look at the division and conflict in our country at this time. Our nation needs communities that are about reconciliation and healing. Our nation needs our church to be what God is calling us to be. So hospitality is about welcoming people into a community, not just into a building. You see, the measure you give, Jesus says, will be the measure you get back. It's a simple algorithm. What you put in, you're going to get out. The degree to which we exercise intentional hospitality will determine the depth and quality of our experience as a community of followers of Jesus. Those of you who are familiar with my homilies know that I like to give homework or give something to do. Here's what I'm inviting you to do. I'm going to invite you this week to reflect on your experience of church as community. What has it been? What is it right now? Now remember this image. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being Catholics Anonymous and 5 being, this is amazing, we know and love each other. If this is a 1 and this is a 5, the question is, where are you right now with your experience of community? And where is God calling you to be?